Welcome everyone. I'm Janet Reyes, the Geospatial Information Librarian here at UC Riverside. Happy to spend the next hour or so talking with you about some of the web app options that are available on the ArcGIS Online platform. There's a lot to choose from, and there's a lot of different name nomenclature, things like that. So we'll go over some of the basic categories and some of the differences and the things that you can do with them as you go along. So hopefully you have a little bit of background or experience, exposure using ArcGIS Online. So some of this will make more sense perhaps if you do have a little bit of that background. I should say this workshop is being recorded, and in a couple weeks, probably a version of the recording with the captions edited will be available on the library's YouTube channel. So you'll be able to view this again if you would like, or other people who may have had to miss this but would like to see it will be able to see it then. Also, I'll be sending out a copy of the slides to you after this workshop. So you will have access to all of the information, and the links that are available in the slides, that'll all be available to you. I have a assistant today. Her name is Jeanette. She's been the one admitting people from the waiting room and so forth. So if you see her interacting in the chat, she might have some information that's relevant to you regarding this workshop. And yeah, I'll try to pause as I go and open it up for questions. If I do kind of blow past any questions that are in the chat, I cannot see the chat as I'm presenting today. So Jeanette might cue me up that there is something to see there, or so if there's a delay, don't worry, I'll eventually know that you have a question in the chat. So yeah, I think, is there any other housekeeping I have to cover? I don't think so. So with that, let me progress to the next slide. There we go. So this is the UCR land acknowledgement. We at UCR would like to respectfully acknowledge our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, this meeting place is home to many Indigenous peoples from all over the world, including UCR faculty, students, and staff, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. You'll see at the bottom of the slide, I have a link to a map of native lands. That's pretty interesting to explore sometime if you have the chance to do so. So I invite you to do that once you get a copy of the slides. So our workshop overview today is that first we'll talk about how do you go about finding web apps in ArcGIS Online. Then we'll talk about some of the web apps themselves. So we'll start with instant apps. Then the next one will be configurable apps. And you see that's a little bit grayed out, and there's a reason for this that I will explain when we get there. Then we go to web app builder, then dashboards, and then finally experience builder. So you see there's like 5 categories right off the bat, and you know what? This doesn't even cover all the apps that are available to you in ArcGIS Online. So there's a lot to go through, but hopefully this overview will help as you make decisions about what app you might be interested in using. So first of all, let's talk about how we find web apps in ArcGIS Online. Well, let's start with, if you haven't seen a web map in ArcGIS Online recently or ever, this is what it looks like. So if somebody shares a map that they made and has the link available to anyone on the internet to look at, this is what they would see. And this is the new map viewer. Again, I don't know how much familiarity you have with this, but there was a map viewer classic And that was the look of ArcGIS Online for the first 5 or 6 years of its existence. Now they're switching over to this map viewer. And if you don't know anything about it, and even if you do know some things about it, it's a little bit tricky to navigate, to understand what all these things are on the left dark sidebar and the right light sidebar, and how do you navigate through this map? I mean, you can do it, but it's not super user friendly. So the idea for why would you want to create a web app, it would be to enable a user to interact with your web map a little more easily, more user-friendly kind of interaction. So giving them options on the way that they interact with your map. So let's go ahead and now take a look at how you would go about finding these web apps within the ArcGIS Online platform. So here's the landing page for the UC Riverside academic ArcGIS Online organization. So if you are a student or a staff member, this is where you would want to come. You see I have the URL circled at upper left. And then you see the circle at upper right where it says sign in. So that would be, of course, you would go there and there's a way that you can sign in just with your UCR net ID and password, and poof, you have an account and you can get in the same way every time after that. If you are affiliated with running the university itself, so maybe you're somebody who's concerned about the light fixtures on campus or the plumbing or the building maintenance, that kind of thing, they have an ArcGIS Online organization too, and I have the link for that or the URL for that down here at the bottom. It's almost the same as this one, except it says ucrgis.maps.arcgis.com. So that's one that the people who maintain the campus use. And then if you're not affiliated with UCR at all, but you're just a member of the public and would like to create a public account, I have a link down here at the bottom that tells you how to go about doing that. Some of the functionality we're going to talk about today is not available on those public accounts, but some of it is. So, you know, that might be of interest to you. Let's see if I can. Next slide. There we go. So the next few slides show you how you locate the apps within ArcGIS Online. So if you have created content in ArcGIS Online, you will eventually have a page like this that contains my content. And you see a button at upper left that is a button that says Create App. And that's one place you can go to launch your selection of apps that you can create. But if you do it from here, you haven't picked a specific map or other piece of content that you have yet. So it's going to present you with all the choices from this button, and we'll see a slide in a couple of slides from now that that shows you that. However, say you do have something here and you would like to create a web app from it. If you click on it on your item here, you would get to a page that looks something like this for that particular item. And then over here, you see among the choices on the right-hand side, there is a button again that allows you to create a web app. And then the options for web apps. So remember I said if you were on the content page, you would see all the choices, and that's what's illustrated here on the left. And there are some apps that we are not even going to cover today in this list of all the choices. However, in the middle of the page, we see this was from the item page. So I already had picked an item that I was interested in creating an app for. And so it's kind of contextual. It will show you the apps that will work with the thing that you have picked, if that makes any sense. And then a third way that you can access web apps is by going into the map viewer itself. So if you have a map selected that you have created, on the left-hand side, which is called the contents toolbar, one of the options that you will see is Create App. And again, it will present you with a list of the types of apps that are possible to make or to use with a particular thing that you have selected. One thing I'll point out is that in all three of these lists, we have story maps as one of the apps, and that is indeed an app. I'm not covering story maps in this workshop today because I have a separate workshop that I've given in the past, and it's recorded and on the library's YouTube channel. So not covering story maps today, but we will be covering, in this case, if you look at the middle screenshot that I have here, we will be covering the instant apps, the web app builder, dashboards, experience builder, and configurable apps. And then the purpose of today's workshop is kind of to provide you with some resources about how to select an app that will work for your purposes. But, you know, probably you shouldn't just rely on my workshop today. You probably would want other resources as well. So that's what this slide is. Shows you an article, a video, some guidance from Esri, which is the company that produces ArcGIS Online. So yeah, here are some more resources for how you go about selecting the app that's appropriate for your needs. Okay, we'll start with looking at instant apps. And instant apps are the ones that I feel are getting the most attention these days from Esri. They are, as they say, the next generation of configurable web mapping apps. So this is something that they've rolled out, I think, in the last year, perhaps. It's fairly new. And the reason for these changes, we'll talk a little bit about this versus configurable apps in a second. It's because like JavaScript has evolved over time. So they want to create apps and things that are built on the most up-to-date coding and things like that. So that's what accounts for the changes here. So the instant apps are the latest and greatest, relatively simple apps to create. You do not need to know how to code to use an app template or to create the app itself. Each template has a single purpose. So pretty much you can do one thing with your map if you create this instant app, whichever one it is. So there's a specific workflow and a single purpose for the app itself. It is compatible with the new ArcGIS Online map viewer, and it's optimized for mobile devices as well. And you have a choice. There's always lots of choices here. You can use the default settings, which just like keep it simple, just show me what's the easiest thing I can use. That would be the default settings. Or if you want to get a little more customized with your approach to the app, it is possible to toggle on more options and do some more customization. So if you do, say, select the default settings, it's possible to set one of these up in like 5 minutes or less. It can be very streamlined if that's what your needs allow, right? So, which is kind of remarkable when you think about it. So when I clicked on, I had an item selected and I clicked on instant apps. What happens is you get this matrix or display array, whatever you want to call it, of all the options that will work for that particular map. So you see they have names like chart viewer and countdown, slider, things like that. So in this case, these were the apps that I could have chosen to create. And you always have the option, I don't know, I know the print is pretty tiny here. This white button allows you to preview it. So you get a feel for what it would look like if you went ahead and actually created the app, which is kind of nice. All of them come with you know, information, a little bit more about what they actually do. So that's helpful as well. So you see, I have the word compatibility circled up here at upper right. So that's the filter that's being applied right now. So they're just showing me for the map I selected, these are all the apps that would work with what you've got going on. But they also, thoughtfully perhaps, show you some additional apps. So these are ones that will not work with what you've selected, and they kind of tell you why. So for instance, here, this is a category gallery, and it says, well, this app requires a group of things. Imagery viewer. This app requires an imagery layer, so you can't use the imagery viewer app if you don't have an image that you're wanting to show. So it's that kind of idea. So you will notice that at the bottom of the array, there will be these additional apps with these little warning signs. Instead of allowing you to preview, they'll show you a sample of what this app would look like, and then you can decide, do I want to change what I've got going on? You know, so I can use this imagery viewer app or whatever is going on. So what I did in preparation for this workshop is I did the tutorial that they provide, and I learned some things from doing that. I was glad I did it. So these notes are kind of my reaction to my experience with the tutorial. One thing is that if you have your map pulled up and you start the instant app, all of the configuration that you do for the app is going to occur in a different window. It's not going to occur in that same map window that you initially had open. And if you allow the default mode to go forward, that's called the express setup, and that gives you just a limited subset of configurable options. But in the tutorial, for instance, they wanted us to experience the full array of choices in a sense, so that we did not do the default. We toggled it on, so we got to see more options for configuring different things. And I have to say, in my experience, my take on it was that it wasn't always obvious what the workflow would be like. So if I was just noodling around with it first time, not being led through this this tutorial, I would have bumbled quite a bit, I think, to find some of the things, to be honest. And I've had that experience with other tools, you know, so it's nothing new, but I just didn't feel like it was super intuitive on what to do next if you didn't have that guidance. So just saying, if you get into instant apps and you have that same reaction, just know that you're not alone with that. So in this case, the tutorial was to build an app for hikers in the Red Rock Canyon, which is outside of Las Vegas. And this is the example of what happens when you finished creating the app. In this case, they brought in a layer that had the trails, and we at first color-coded the trails based on how difficult they would be to climb. But the idea behind this was, suppose you're running the kiosk, the visitor center, at this park, and you have a kiosk at the visitor center that allows folks who visit to try to find a trail that they think they can handle based on the amount of time they have and who's in their party and so forth. So for instance, here this trail is selected, and over here in the inset, it shows you the ground elevation change as you hike up the trail. So then the visitor can decide, you know what, that looks too steep at the end, and I don't think we want to do that one. So let me try to find, you know, something that's a little flatter. So that's the basic idea. It does this thing for the people using the app, and that's pretty much all it does for this example. So that's what an instant app is like. And if you do create several apps over time, then what you will have is the option to look at them all together in an array of cards again. And if you've dealt with story maps, this will feel familiar, because there's also a way that you can have all your story maps together on one page to look at. And this allows you to configure or make a copy of or delete any existing apps that you have going on. So making copies is sometimes nice, because maybe you've got something, you fiddled around with it quite a bit and you've got it just the way you like it. You would like to apply it to other maps that you have. So making a copy and then just switching out the map would be a possibility that way. And so here's my very full instant app resource slide for you. Yeah, lots of information out there that you could refer to. And I wanted to highlight the one that's at the very bottom, actually the two that are at the bottom. So the lesson is the lesson that the tutorial that I showed you some excerpts from. And This was a chat, the GIS and higher education chat. Esri does this once a month at the beginning of the month. And this very month, the February 1st, the presentation was about instant apps. And I was waiting and waiting for them to share the video on their YouTube channel. Day after day I was checking, and today it was there. So I was able to include it on the slides. So that was a very good presentation, and they do go through more detail about some of the apps and the things that you can do with the different apps and so forth. So that would be a worthwhile thing to look at, in addition to some of these other resources as well. I'm going to take a pause for a drink of water, and I'll just be quiet for a second and see if there's any questions so far. Okay, we'll move on to configurable apps. So remember, this was the one that was grayed out in my initial overview. So like instant apps, they enable you to create apps from maps, scenes, or groups without writing code. It's available for Map Viewer Classic, but not for the new Map Viewer. So remember, I said there was this transition from Map Viewer Classic to the new Map Viewer. These were written back in the beginning when Map Viewer Classic was all that was going on. So they are moving to what Esri calls mature support. They're not really putting any more development into configurable apps. And in fact, several of them have been migrated into the instant apps category of things. So if you have been using apps for a while in ArcGIS Online and you're familiar with the configurable apps and have used them in the past, some of them are now showing up as instant apps, and the ones that they haven't migrated over yet are still available, but I wouldn't count on them being around too much longer in their current form, if that makes any sense. And when you're using configurable apps, what you do is you search for templates to use based on their purpose. So what does that mean? Well, we'll take a look at the next slide. So remember when I said when you choose instant app for a particular thing that you have selected, it kind of gives you a whole array of choices on what will work with your app, with your particular map. For configurable apps, you select, I want to make a configurable app, and it just asks you, well, what do you want to do? So do you want people to explore or summarize your data? Well, then here are the apps that work. So it's a little bit different approach to guiding you to pick the app that would work for you. You have to kind of have in mind what you would like to do. Although, honestly, I think there are some repeats. So an app that shows up here might also show up in another category or two. But that's the basic idea on how you would go about picking a configurable app. And then once an app is selected, you do, again, get a chance to preview. What does that look like with my map as it currently exists? And then you have a button that you can also use to just go ahead and create the web app itself. So as I prepared for this workshop, I spent a lot of time on the Esri website, you know, trying to absorb what are the best tips I can pass along, kind of thing. And so with each of these app combinations, they offer some examples of, you know, people who have already used them. So lo and behold, when I scrolled down to their example, they had chosen our UC Riverside campus map as an example of a configurable app. And you can see that they also have a couple other examples as well, but this is the one that pops up first. So I thought that was kind of cool. So now you know the UCR campus map, the interactive campus map was built as a configurable app in ArcGIS Online. And so here's my slide for configurable app resources. You can see I don't have quite as many resources because honestly, you probably won't be using them too much longer, to be honest. It's all about instant apps these days. So, but they still do exist. The configurable apps do. So here are some resources that might help you if honestly, you really do need to use a configurable app rather than an instant app. Okay, now we get to Web App Builder. If you think of instant apps and configurable apps as like the entry level or simplest kind of app template to use. Web App Builder is, we're in kind of in the intermediate stage here. And then when we get to Experience Builder at the end, that's more the deluxe model. So here's Web App Builder, our kind of mid-range app builder. Again, you can build apps without writing code. They always like to point that out. You use configurable themes and ready-to-use widgets. And really, with Web App Builder, it's all about the widgets. That's the big thing, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But that's really the focus of using Web App Builder. Also, they have a lot of material regarding Web App Builder for developers. So if you have those kind of skills, or you have somebody on your staff or a coworker that does have those kind of skills, get them involved, and there's a lot more customization options available with that kind of skill set. And one of the things you can do also is download and host the app on your web server rather than having Esri host it. So if that's of interest, can't do that with instant apps, I don't think, but you certainly can with Web App Builder. So the basics of building a web app with Web App Builder is you start by selecting a style, which involves a theme and colors. And I have a link there to theme, kind of an explanation of what the themes are. It's sort of like a template, but sort of not. So it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit interesting on the different terminology they use on these different web app options that are almost the same, but not quite. So anyway, here they're calling it a theme and colors. And we have a next slide, we'll have a little bit more about that. Then you get to choose which data you want to use, whether it's a two-dimensional map or a 3D scene. You choose the desired functionality, and that's where the widgets come in. There's a lot of widgets that you can pick from, and you can have your app do more than one thing, unlike the instant app. You get to then test how the app looks and functions on various devices, and then you can launch and share it. So again, I went through the tutorial for Web App Builder in preparation for this workshop, and the next couple slides kind of, again, show my experience and takeaways from going through that experience. So remember those steps on the previous slide. It said select a theme, and then your map, and then the widgets. So that's what these 4 boxes are on the left side of Web App Builder when you get into it. So you start with the theme, and that's what's partially captured up here on the top of this screenshot. So they have things like jewelry box and plateau and tab and pocket. So I followed the tutorial, and I just picked the one they told me to pick, but I did not super duper get into exploring all these different themes and what their differences are. And same with, well, style is pretty much what color do you want? So that's fairly straightforward. And then layout, I guess each of these themes have an assortment of layouts that are possible within that theme. So that's something else we did not get into too much of the tutorial. So this tutorial was interesting. It was about a landslide that occurred in Washington State, I think back in 2014, that actually kind of wiped out a small community that was there. So the idea behind the app in the tutorial was to show the before and after imagery of this landslide. So that's the idea behind it. So that once you picked the theme and the style and the layout and all that kind of thing, you would then go to the next tab, which is the map, and you got to choose which map you wanted to have. You can do things like set the extent. Like for this instance, you just really want the app to be focused on the landslide area. You do not want people to be panning all over the state of Washington or, you know, the whole West Coast or the world or anything. You want it just to be contained there. So you can set that kind of limitation on the user and that kind of thing. So a couple of things you can do with the map itself. And then we get to the widgets, our third tab here. And by the way, the fourth tab says attributes. So that's kind of setting up the metadata, and you talk about descriptions and things like that, giving credit where credit's due and all that kind of thing. So Web App Builder comes with a set of default widgets. However, you do not need to have all of the default widgets in your app if you choose not to. So it's a little hard to see in this screenshot, but what I did was hover over, say this is an attribute table widget. And if you hover over it, this little icon at upper right means that I can hide this widget. I can toggle this on and off, and I can say, no, nobody's going to need to look at the attribute table. Let's not even have that in the app so people don't even get tempted to use it. Same thing with like my location. In this case, unless they live in Washington State, near where the slide occurred, there's no need for them to have the ability to see where their location is in relation to this. So, that we could mute that one or turn that one off as well. So you get the idea that here's some basic widgets. You have the ability to turn them on or off, and you also have the ability to customize them a little bit, and that's what this little pencil icon indicates down there. A little bit of customization. So beyond the default set of widgets, then what happens is they have up to 5 little boxes down below the default widgets. And what you would do is like click, if you haven't added any extra widgets, you would click the first box, widget 1, and then all of these choices come up, and they're arranged alphabetically. So you could pick from among 70 different actions that you might want folks who are using your app to be able to partake in. So for instance, in this case, this is kind of the result of the web app that was built with the tutorial. In this case, we have older imagery and newer imagery. And so this little widget would enable the user to have a slider so that they could slide back and forth and see what it looked like before, kind of peeling back the newer imagery to reveal what it looked like before. There's an information button as well. And then this is a ruler. So it's possible for the user, if they wanted to measure what ground distance is, for the extent of a landslide, they could do that and get a distance calculation, that kind of thing. And this arrow and this notation, that was something that was added as we built the app as well. You can customize it with a logo. This was like choosing the black color in the theme area, then that turned this top bar to black. We also had the opportunity to do things like customize the scale bar. So that gives you kind of a feel for how you go about using Web App Builder. So if you're a little confused right now, it's like Instant Apps, Web App Builder, which one? What are the differences? Well, Web App Builder, you have those widget choices, right? Versus Instant Apps, the functions that a user can partake in are specific to the template that you chose. With a Web App Builder, you do need to have that organizational account, such as the UCR account, not the personal or the public account, rather. Whereas Instant Apps are available in those public accounts and all the other accounts too. Web App Builder has options for developers to do their thing and make it even more customized, where Instant Apps, more limited customization options. And like I said, with Web App Builder, you have the option to self-host, versus Instant Apps, they're going to be hosted by Esri, end of story kind of thing. So anyway, I hope that helps clarify some of the differences between Web App Builder and Instant Apps. And here's my Web App Builder resources slide. So you can see that I've included a link for developers. And honestly, when you look for stuff about Web App Builder, a lot does come up for developers. So I think they really want to, provide resources for developers to take the basics and then kind of run with it and, have the ability to customize things a little bit more. And this link in the middle of the tutorial, that is the the web app that I just showed you, the OSO slide. So I'm going to pause again, and I'll just see if there's any questions so far or comments. Okay, well, let's go on to dashboards. Dashboards are a little different. They enable you to present data in an easy to read display. It enables you to visualize trends or to monitor status in real time. They are tailored for a given audience, or they can be. And there are configurable elements. So there are many pieces on the screen when you're looking at a dashboard, and you can adjust what each of them convey, and you can rearrange the display, on the screen. So kind of optimize it for where you think people need to focus their attention on and so forth. Dashboards have filtering capabilities so that you can, or the person who's interacting with it can have a refined set of data based on what they click on. So that's an option there. And then also dashboards can be designed to be interactive. So somebody is actually clicking on things, or unattended, like again, maybe it's a kiosk or a big screen in a welcome area, and people can just see this dashboard, but they're not going to be able to interact with it so much. And apparently there was once dashboards in the past, and they have now called that set of dashboards Classic. So this is the latest and greatest version is what we're talking about now. And I do have an example of a dashboard. Maybe we'll circle back to this at the end if there is time. But the next slide shows you some examples as well. So there's 4 types that Esri distinguishes between. Some of the distinctions are a little fuzzy for me, but to the best of my understanding, the one I think that would apply most for folks in the academic world is this informational dashboard. So this enables you to assemble information and present it to the community. This example looks like it's about Super Bowl 54. But of course, any topic is possible. And if you are familiar at all with the Johns Hopkins coronavirus dashboard, that has been an amazing tool for lots of people to refer to over time as the pandemic has progressed. Has a lot of information by country, by county, even in the United States, vaccination rates, death rates, all exposure rates and all that kind of thing. So that's like the outstanding example of an informational dashboard at present. But there are many others as well. Let's drop down here to the one below. Informational is operational. So I think we can all understand what that might be like. If you are somebody who is monitoring, say, first responders, like a fire station, or police, or maybe it's something like the electrical grid in your area, or that kind of thing. And you need to see what's going on right now. How many crews do I have out there? Where are they? What's the category of crisis they are dealing with? That kind of thing. So an operational dashboard allows folks, like in real time, to just assess what's going on and make decisions that way. So then over here, tactical is more for maybe the mid managers, not the people who are managing like right now, but maybe somebody that they might report to, say, who needs to see what the trends are, and over time, week by week or month by month, how is this going? What kind of things are going on? So analyzing the data and the trends a little bit more. And then the strategic goes up even to a higher level. So this would be the big executive or policymaker, or somebody at a fairly high level who needs a really good overview of how are we doing overall, how are our key performance indicators doing, that kind of thing. So that's what they're calling a strategic type of dashboard. So I confess I did not have time to do the dashboard tutorial. What I did do, though, is go look at the tutorial and selected some of the images from the tutorials to give us all a feel for what it would be like to go ahead and build a dashboard. So over here at upper left, you see there's, you would click on this icon to go ahead and start configuring the map if you have a map in your dashboard. This is pretty essential. Everybody probably building a dashboard would at some point need to get to this section where you actually pick the component or the element that you want to have in the dashboard one by one, whether it's a pie chart or a serial chart, a gauge, a map, whatever it is. Here's where you get to pick that. And then once you pick something like that, of course, you have to figure out if it's a chart, say, what's my minimum value, my maximum value, how am I going to split the data up? How am I going to show it? What colors am I going to use? All of that stuff, all the formatting, all the data options. You would do that element by element so that you get it showing what you need it to show. Sometimes there's actions that can be set. For instance, if you picture a dashboard and you have maybe a bar chart or a bar graph or something like that, and if you click on the bar that represents California, would you want, and you have a map, would you want the state of California to light up, like to flash on the map as you pick it over here in the chart, or would you rather have it have the map zoom to that state, or so things like that. You can set up kind of actions, interactivity between the elements, and then finally, of course, like I said, you can arrange the elements on the dashboard. So you decide what goes at upper left, and you decide what goes at lower right, and everything in between. You can configure it that way. So those are some of the very basic elements of how you would go about configuring a dashboard. And I have some resources for you here. Possibly I will eventually come up with a dashboard workshop all by itself, but I at least wanted to show you a very brief overview of what that would be like. Yeah, and if I didn't say it directly, I will say it now, that you don't necessarily have to have a map on your dashboard. That's one of the interesting things, unlike the first three things that we saw, which were all about having a map involved. All right, we're down to the last of the 5 categories of apps I'm going to show. This is called Experience Builder. And like I said, this is the high-end type of experience for building a web app. You can build one from scratch in Experience Builder if you know what you're doing, or you can use one of the templates they provide. There are widgets for maps, images, texts, and lists. So here again, maps are optional. You can, similar to a story map, you can have an experience built app without having a map in it. And story maps don't necessarily have to have maps in them either. The experience that you build can be on one or multiple pages. It can support both 2D and 3D views in one app. Deep customization is possible if you've got the skills to do that. And only WebGL-enabled browsers are supported. So it's not going to work on an old web browser that doesn't have fairly good graphics capabilities. Again, I have a link down here to a particular experienced builder app. And again, maybe we'll click on that at the end if there's time. But it is a much more deluxe experience. So when you want to have choices on which template to use in Experience Builder, you get to see something like this. Some of the names are very similar to the names that we saw in other categories earlier in the workshop. So I know Jewelry Box came up as one of the web app builder themes, and here it's they're calling it a template here in Experience Builder. So anyway, there's several template choices that you can choose from. And I, again, did not go through the Experience Builder tutorials, but what I did do is kind of look at an Experience Builder app that was built by somebody at UCR, just real quick, just to get a feel for what it might be like to go ahead and build one. And when you open it up, I don't know what you call these things, but it's a window pops up and it kind of gives you the very basics of leading you through. And here's how you do this. And then you click next, and here's how you do this after you have done that kind of thing. So that kind of, this is that window, this white area here is that little guide, as it were, to Experience Builder that you would see as you confront it. You can see some of the widgets that are available there. And then on the right-hand side, when you have picked an element, there are all kinds of choices, again, that you can make as far as what the size is, and if it's animated, and what the background looks like, and so forth and so on. So with everything that goes into your app that you've built with Experience Builder, you have choices on what exactly it's going to look like and how it's going to behave, and so forth. So now, if you're a little bit puzzled about what's the difference between Experience Builder and Web App Builder, so we're looking at the intermediate to the more advanced. So like I said, Experience Builder, it can have a map in it, certainly, but it doesn't have to. Mapping is optional, whereas Web App Builder, it's about maps only. Experience Builder, you can have a fixed or a scrolling screen. Web App Builder, you've just got a fixed screen. Experience Builder, you can have a single page or multiple pages. Web App Builder just allows you to build a single page only. Now, these next terms, mobile adaptive design versus mobile friendly, I read what those meant, and it wasn't especially clear of a distinction, but I did get the impression that mobile adaptive is better and preferable if you can have that. Not that there's anything wrong with mobile friendly, it's just mobile adaptive is a better performance, I think. With Experience Builder, you could have a 2D scene and a 3D view content within one app. With Web App Builder, they're going to have to be in separate apps. Experience Builder does have action triggers, such as like if I click on this, I make this other thing happen. And Web App Builder, that's not native, but I think your developers can come up with that action if they need to. The one place where Web App Builder has the advantage so far over Experience Builder is the number of widgets. So like I said, with Web App Builder, we're over 70. Here we have 27 basic widgets and then 7 layout widgets. So not quite the number of widgets here, but they're kind of expecting folks with a lot of experience in maybe web design, things like that, to be using this and to be able just to dive in and do it themselves, kind of thing. Yeah, and so here are the Experience Builder resources I came up with for you. Again, there's that higher education chat I mentioned earlier with the instant apps. That there was a presentation just earlier this month for instant apps. Well, when they first started the GIS and higher education chats, one of the first things they presented on was Experience Builder. So there's the link to that presentation. It's also very good, and I recommend watching that as well. All right, we are almost done with the workshop. I just wanted to mention that if you are a UCR affiliate and you would like to have the chance to come into a classroom in the library and maybe practice or look at in more depth along with me at some of these apps that we have presented today, a week from today, the same time slot, 2 to 3, I can be there in Orbach Science Library, room 122. However, I would appreciate hearing from you by noon the previous day, if you really do want to do that. There's a little bit of logistical challenges, so I would like to know first whether anybody is actually going to be there. So please do contact me before noon next Tuesday. And if somebody says they want to be there, then I will be there too. How does that sound? Thank you so much for your attention. And here again is my contact information. Be sure to check out the library website for other types of workshops and events. We do a lot to support our students, faculty, and staff. And always looking for more ideas for how we can serve you better. And that's one of the reasons why I'm hoping that you will consider filling out the survey that Jeanette has, I hope, put in the chat. There's 3 questions in the survey, but you just get to pick which one you want to answer the question for. And so it just takes a couple minutes there. And the feedback always really does help us understand how we're doing, if we're serving your needs, maybe what you would like to see different in the future or extra, that kind of thing. So do appreciate your taking a moment to do that survey. So with that, I will maybe exit out of my slides here and see if we have any questions. By the way, I'm still screen sharing, so you are seeing now the dashboard that I had linked to. This is kind of a basic dashboard, but it's about redlining and exposure to urban heat islands throughout the United States. So the idea is you can pick from this menu of different cities throughout the country. And as you pick a city, a map of that city shows up with information about tree cover and the degree of minority population and so forth. Information over here changes based on what city you're looking at. It is possible to say, click on this and you get additional information and so forth. So that's an example of a dashboard. And then this was the Mars mission tracker that was built with Experience Builder. I haven't fully explored its functionality, but it's pretty cool. I'll just say that. Yeah, you can look at where the rover was on any particular day. You can look at what the crater looks like dry versus flooded. You've got some scenes that were taken from the rover itself. You can fly to where the rover currently is located. So all very cool, right? So this, you can see this is a very deluxe experience. So.
Yeah, hi Janet. I just had a quick question about the web apps. If you wanted to build something in one of these and you could go through the UCR thing that's hosted, do you have to pay extra to have that like be online for people to access?
No, no.
Okay.
If you're affiliated with UCR, all of this is free, and people who would be using the app, there's no paywall there for that.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let me stop sharing for a second. I'll take a look at the chat. Okay, are there any questions that I have not yet answered? Thank you for that comment. Like I said, if you missed it at the beginning, I'm going to be sharing the slides out with you by email shortly after we're done here, I hope. Unless I get sidetracked, it'll be tomorrow morning for sure. And so you'll have access to all the links in all the slides, and the recording will be available in a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, on the library's YouTube channel. You're welcome. How to access the slides. So I will be sending them out. We have email addresses for y'all. So yeah, just they'll be attached to an email that you'll be getting. You're welcome. Yes, as long as we're here, I can post that link in the chat. It will also be in the slides, but let me go ahead and round that up for you. And if you go to the Esri website for Experience Builder, they have, in fact, for all of these, they have a gallery of examples of what people have made. So that's always interesting to look at as well. Okay, well, hearing no other questions, I'll just go ahead and stop the recording. I'll keep this open a couple minutes if anybody wants to chat some more, but otherwise, thank you for coming. Thanks very much. And oh, I see the question now about you're not a student. So it depends if you're affiliated with UCR at all. You would have access to this one way or another. If you're not affiliated with UCR or any other organization, you can create what's called a public account, and there's a link to that in one of the early slides. However, I think with the public account, you can do the instant apps or the configurable apps, but I don't know that anything more advanced than that is available to you. The dashboards, maybe, I'm not sure about that. So yeah, hopefully that helps answer that question a little bit. So when you get the slides, you'll see how to access or how to maybe start your public account. You're welcome.